Okay, so now we're going to apply our cob. We've gone through the mixing, we've gone through the materials that we needed to make cob, and now we've got our wall here that we've been working on. And this wall is at a stage where it's gotten fairly dried out, and in order to put fresh cob on it, we need to re-moisten it, reactivate the clay by applying some slip. And so we're going to paint slip all over here, but before we do that, we're just going to trim the wall a little bit more. It's most important to trim the wall while it's still kind of leather hard, while it's not fully dry. The drier it gets, the harder it gets to trim, the harder it gets to sculpt. So it's good to use it in kind of an in-between phase, not fresh right after you put it on the wall, but a couple hours later or by the afternoon or the next day, that's about the right time when you want to be thinking about trimming and shaping the wall. So in order to trim the wall, we're going to use our cob saw, which is our old hand saw with the big teeth cut out of it. We've cut off this little notch at the back here, just so we can use it in a reverse grip. And we go along the wall. And we're just going to keep trimming until we get a nice flat wall. You can use a level to check the wall. You can eyeball it. It's just more or less whatever you're going for in the end. If you want a nice, straight, flat, vertical wall, you're going to want to use a level. If you're more okay with the free-form aspects of cob, then you can just sculpt it by eye and let it come out how it comes out. If you do that, you just got to be careful that your wall doesn't end up leaning further and further into the room or further and further away. So a level is pretty handy in keeping the wall an even plane on both sides. Sometimes on the outside of the wall, you're going to want to buttress the wall. So you'll have a nice wide wall at the bottom, and then on the inside you can make it nice and vertical and flat. And then on the outside you can kind of taper it in and feather it up so it's a thinner wall towards the top, but still has all the strength because you're letting the shape go out at the bottom, as in a buttress, as in a tree. It's a really strong anchored form for a building. So we'll just go along and trim a bit more. And then we can always come back later and fine tune it. We can also fill in voids with our first base coat. But you want to try and do as much of the sculpting while it's still semi-moist as possible. So now we're going to paint our slip on. And before we left this wall last time, we made sure that we left a key. So we've built up about 3 inches in a spine in the center of the wall. So if this was a wall that was 2 feet wide, you build about a 4-inch, 5-inch wide spine that's up to 6-8 inches even on a bigger wall in the middle of the wall. And what that does is it creates almost like a Lego-like surface that the next layer is going to key into, lock into, and it'll create a lot more monolithic wall as you go up. The key also allows you to dry out the wall faster. So if you're wanting to put on more cob faster, adding a key at the end of the day is a really good way to increase the surface area of the wall and speed up the drying time. And that'll allow you to build a lot faster. So we've done that. Our wall is dried out quite a bit. So we're going to paint some slip on and then we'll apply our cob. In order to apply your slip, having a little bucket and a low quality paintbrush is the best way to do it. And you can just dunk it in and paint it on. As you're painting it on, you're also going to knock out any loose bits because they won't adhere as well, and it'll just make a better bond between the next layer and the last layer. If you're working on the top of a wall, you can also just pour the slip on with the bucket. Another important thing to point out is that whenever you're having a connection between cob and wood, it's important to slip the wood and apply cob to the layer that you've slipped, and then if you're going to add any more, just apply more slip. If you're trying to really anchor the cob in, or you're putting in what's called a dead man in the wall for anchoring a window or for anchoring fixtures down the road, any sort of piece of wood that you anchor in the wall, what you can do is you can add nails spiked into the wood. And that'll give the cob something else to grab onto, to hold onto. The straw will get all wrapped around it, and it'll create a better bond between the wood and the cob. Because we have this thin layer of cob going in front of this piece of wood, we've made sure to tie straw back into the other parts of the wall. And the straw really helps wrap it in and hold it onto the sides that are more stable rather than the bond between the wood and the cob. So now we're ready to put on our cob. We've got our nice strawy mixture. Not too wet, not too dry. That way we can put on quite a bit in one go. If it's too wet, you're going to end up with what you call slumping. And it's basically just the wet, heavy cob starts to billow out at the bottom and starts to come away from the wall. And that's totally fine. You want that, and what you're going to do is just trim it off as the wall sets up. So you can build up quite a bit, have it kind of slumping out at the bottom, and then trim it off with the cob saw. So as we're integrating the cob into the old cob, we want to make sure that we're really working it down into all the little holes that we've left in the old cob. You want to leave a lot of texture in the surface with your thumbs, or you can use a little stick known as a cobbler's thumb, any short piece of wood that's about 1 inch to 2 inches in diameter. And you can just texture up the surface of the top of the wall, and that again will give something for the new cob to key into.